Hello and welcome to Reading Philosophy with Ometa. This is a platform where we discuss philosophy and profound thinkers in philosophy. We continue our assignment on Philosophy 203, an introduction to ethics. In the last discussion, we looked into a distinction between personal and social ethics, in which we looked extensively on the ethics of three great ancient Greek philosophers, namely Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. In the following discussion, we are going to answer the question, what is normative ethical relativism, and why we think ethical absolutism is better than ethical relativism. In this assignment, I will be throwing more light on the logics of the normative ethical relativists and as well as the criticism of the theory. This theory claims that a valid universal moral principle does not exist anywhere in the world. According to the normative ethical relativists, moral rightness and wrongness of actions differs from society to society. That is, every society have a moral standard relatively associated or related to their culture, custom, and norms. And if this is the case, that different societies have their own moral principle, then we cannot claim to have absolute universal moral standards binding on all men at all times. Each culture establishes the basic value and principles that serve as the foundation for morality. This is the case if you've tried to conduct a survey between Benin Republic and Nigeria. You will find out that majority of Beninese will believe that laws that exist in Nigeria should not be applied to Benin. Laws varies from country to country. Recently, I made a comment on social media, Facebook precisely, that what is morally right to the US as a country and America as a continent, and as well as other Western countries, can be morally wrong to us in Africa. The comment was a reply to one of the world leaders who was trying to demonize one of the African countries and their leaders for enacting a law against gay and lesbianism. This is exactly one of the issues the normative ethical relativists are trying to address. Our traditions and customs around the world differ. What is right in America might be wrong in Nigeria. This is absolutely a justified belief. There shouldn't be a universal moral standard binding on all men, even if that should be, as we shall find out in the following assignments, when discussing reasons why I think ethical absolutism is better than ethical relativism. One of the reasons why we cannot ignore the notion of the normative ethical relativism is the fact that apart from the world being made up of diverse culture and custom, even the religion, which in many ways have silenced different culture and customs, could not solve the problem of whether there should be a universal moral principle or not. Take Africa, for instance. Despite the fact that we have our customs and the cultural heritage which have suffered several defeats from other world religions like Christianity and Muslim, When issue of gay and lesbianism came up, despite the fact that our custom and culture frowns at this act, majority of Africans are not even saying that our tradition condemn the act. They are rather saying that the Bible condemns the act. I suppose some of those in the West advocating for gay and lesbianism as a moral principle and pushing for it to be imposed on all people also goes to church. If this is the case, then there is confusion either in the Bible or among men, because it is the same Bible those in the West are carrying that those in Africa are carrying, but we now seem to be having different belief and opinion from the same book. So the point is, if religion could not settle the matter of this problem of moral principle, a role it has played for ages, even the condemnation of several inherent cultural practices, then it is obvious that the theory of a universal moral principle cannot stand a test of time, just as the theory of normative ethical relativism may not after we examine its criticism. There is no other better way to define ethnocentrism or promote the evil act than trying to destroy people's identity. People's culture is their identity, and any attempt to destroy people's identity poses a serious threat to their very existence. The theory revealed a secret we should never ignore. It says that any attempt of those from one culture to apply their principles to other people of other culture is only a political move and an assertion of power. In fact, if Nigeria dares to impose any of its law on Benin Republic, then you will see America and their message of democracy in another dimension. Why we think ethical absolutism is better than ethical relativism? Well, there has also been a strong criticism against normative ethical relativism. There are several problems and the criticism of the theory of normative ethical relativism. The theory failed woefully in its assertion that there is absolutely no universal moral principle. According to the ethical absolutists, or those advocating for universal moral criteria and standard, the supporters of ethical relativism cannot promote the theory with the claim that its acceptance will support tolerance for people of other cultures, because tolerance is not necessarily a good thing. It is only a good thing in those cultures where it is promoted. It cannot be promoted for all peoples. If people are raised in a culture where it is taught to be a good thing to be intolerant, then that is what people should be. There have been and there are cultures in which people are raised to believe that they have a superior culture and a right to use and abuse other people. So, for that group of people, tolerance is not a good thing. Normative ethical relativism cannot be used to promote tolerance. It is a poorly thought out and a confused notion of tolerance that leads to the theory of normative ethical relativism. My late father, Chief Christopher Ometa, his soul rest in peace, have always told us a story and often expressed his pain and frustration anytime he remembered the events that terminated the lives of his twin brothers. In the pre-colonial and during the early colonial Nigeria, there was a culture of infanticide of twins, and Igbo cultural practices that always make my father shed tears. My father, who was the only son of his mother plus a sister, have always regretted that he would have other siblings to call brother, if not the deaths of his twin brothers, who was born during the time when the birth of twins was a taboo in part of Igbo land, where he was living with his parents. These cultural practices was accepted by all people in this part of Igbo land. According to the theory of normative ethical relativism, every society is governed by their peculiar ideas about ethics and morality. The truth is that each of these cultures has a predominant view about their ways of life, which maybe some few others may frown at, but have been accepted to be correct because it is the predominant view. This means that no other principles could override the predominant view. Thus, there can be no criticism of the moral view held by the majority of the people in a given society by any minority. This is because the minority must always be wrong based on the fact that they are minority. In fact, I've heard the Nigeria senators saying several times during House plenary that majority will always have their will, while minority have their say. This is indirectly telling you that the statement of the minority is irrelevant, as it is of no use and value. In a nutshell, the theory of normative ethical relativism cannot support or explain criticism of the majority's view by minority. All of us have come to find ourselves in a multicultural world. We are all born into one human family with different ways of life. The way the Europeans live and even think is quite different from the way the Africans live and do things. Should we say because of this fact, we should not have a universal moral principle to guide our collective existence? If we shy away from the fact that we need a universal moral standard to be able to live together as members of one human family, we will end up committing a severe moral error, an immoral act of subjugation. What this means is that the theory would apply within a culture and within a society wherever there are isolated groups. In other words, the theory eventually supports a subjectivism in which each person raises differently from others must make his or her own moral rules, and those rules are equal in value and importance as any other set of rules. Thus, this is also implies that no one has the right to make moral judgment about another person, as everyone has the right to have his or her own morals. That every society have their various moral view is not a reasonable evidence to conclude that there is no possibility of having a moral principle that all humans could come to recognize and accept. There will always be a point in time when we reach a moral agreement to establish an ethical principle that could be common to all. Nigeria as a country, for example, is a multicultural society. By the virtue of we coming together as a country, has modified our various cultures. Some part of our individual cultures has been silenced because of the constitution that bind us together. What now replaces those cultures is Nigeria culture. Take, for example, the Nigerian culture that placed value on the human life. These basic principles that there is a right to life have automatically pronounced the infanticide of twins wrong. This means that no matter any part of Igbo land I may find myself tomorrow, if any community dares killed my children on the basis that they were born twins, that entire community will have to face a legal actions and the sanctions from the federal government. What is playing here now is a cultural dispute. A community culture is at conflict with the Nigerian culture. Now, our collective culture as a country is expected to supersede every other culture within the country. Thus, what now replaces the individual culture is our collective culture. That does not mean that the Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba culture no longer exist. Rather, anywhere any of these individual culture goes against our collective culture, those individual cultures are expected to be silenced. Similarly, our collective ethics and moral standard as members of the human family is a universal moral principle and is expected to silence or replace every other moral principle that conflicts with it. Thus, inasmuch as the normative ethical relativism tries to prevent any form of political imposition in the name of establishing a universal moral principle, it fails woefully in its assertion that there is absolutely no universal moral principle. I am of the belief that what we need as a people is a modified universal moral principle that can tolerate and accommodate all culture. A people cannot impose their culture on another, but we can modify some cultures or even delete it after we've reached agreement that is guided by rational reasoning a pluralism. The criticism of this theory, the theory should be modified and not to be scrapped out or totally ignored the perspective of the normative ethical relativism. Thank you for viewing. I want to apologize for not posting this content earlier as promised in the last video. The honest fact is that the activities in the Middle East disrupted me. I mean, the war between Hamas and Israel took my attention. Up next is the encounter between the early church and the Greek philosophers. I cannot guarantee you the soonest of this incoming video, as we are now in our interactive section of our school program, which means that we are now preparing for our exams. So if I don't post the encounter between the early church and the Greek philosophers before our exams, it will be immediately after our first semester exam before any other video. Your being here is always an encouragement. Please like, subscribe, and follow if you've not done so that you don't miss any video once it is dropped. Once again, I really appreciate your presence here. Ometa Tabansi, Mikael.